Good afternoon. This is Chair French convening a special business meeting of the Kansas Corporation Commission for Monday, July 7th at this time, joined by my colleagues, Commissioner Keene and Commissioner Keither. On today's special business meeting agenda, we have just one noticed item, and that is in docket number 25, EKCE 207 PRE, and this is a proposed order on settlement agreements. Our presenter for this item is Mr. Brian Fedotin. Brian, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, commissioners. And to everyone listening in, this is the first predetermination docket that we've had in about 15 years. So bear with me. This presentation is going to be a bit long. It's not going to be nearly as long as if I were to read the entire order, but you may want a comfortable seat because it's going to be a somewhat lengthy presentation. On November 6, 2024, Evergy Kansas Central filed an application requesting determination of the rate-making principles and treatment to apply to its cost recovery relating to the construction and acquisition of 50% of two 710 megawatt combined cycle gas turbines, or CCGTs, located in Kansas. One called the Viola plant and the other the McNew plant, and also for construction and ownership of the Kansas Sky generating resource, which is a solar plant. The Viola plant is scheduled to open on January 1st, 2029, and the McNew plant is projected to open on January 1st, 2030. On April 16th, 2025, two settlements were filed for commission approval. The settlement on the two gas plants is non-unanimous, and the settlement on the solar plant is unanimous. Let me walk through some of the key terms of the natural gas or CCGT settlement. There's an agreement on the definitive cost estimates for 50% of each plant. The definitive cost estimates, or DCEs, are $788.75 million for Viola and $800.51 million for the McNew plant, and those exclude AFUDC. The agreement is also that those DCEs are reasonable. Under the agreement, Evergy will collaborate with staff and CURB during the development of a gas purchasing plan and file the plan in a compliance docket. Before the plants are placed in service, Evergy will meet at least annually with staff and CURB to discuss potential revisions to the gas purchasing plan. And after plants are placed in service, Evergy will meet annually with staff and CURB to discuss the gas purchasing plan. If the addition of these gas plants materially revise Evergy's current natural gas hedging plan, Evergy will collaborate with staff and CURB on a revised hedging plan, which will be filed with the commission prior to completing any procurement. Once all natural gas transportation arrangements have been finalized, Evergy will make another compliance filing with the commission, including the financial terms and conditions under which firm natural gas transportation has been secured and the duration of the transportation agreement. Under the proposed settlement, Evergy can implement a CWIP rider, which is construction work in progress. Evergy will work with staff to develop monthly project status reporting, and if Evergy becomes aware of information that leads it to reasonably believe that actual project costs would exceed 115% of the DCE, Evergy is required to make a compliance filing justifying the prudence of continuing forward with the gas plants or requesting commission approval to abandon the projects. On to some of the key terms of the unanimous solar settlement. The parties agree that the definitive cost estimate is $228.1 million, excluding AFUDC. Amounts spent in excess of that would be subject to prudence review, with Evergy bearing the burden of proof to show any amount incurred in excess is prudently incurred, just and reasonable to recover from ratepayers. A levelized revenue requirement fixed for 30 years would be included in Evergy's total revenue requirement for its next general rate case after the Kansas Sky is placed in service. If provisions of the IRA applicable to solar are substantially revised or repealed prior to the start of construction, Evergy will be required to make a compliance filing justifying the prudence of continuing forward with Kansas Sky project or informing the commission that it will abandon the project. And Evergy will work with staff to develop monthly project status reporting. And that's the part of the terms, and I'll move on to some more background. An evidentiary hearing was held from April 21st through April 23rd, and the commission heard live testimony from 10 witnesses, and proponents and opponents of the settlement appeared and were able to conduct cross-examination and were subject to cross-examination. Turning to the unanimous solar agreement. Again, it's unanimous, and when evaluating a unanimous settlement, the commission applies a 3-factor test. First, whether there's substantial competent evidence to support the settlement, whether the settlement establishes just and reasonable rates, and third, whether the settlement promotes the public interest. Here, the commission finds that the settlement agreement for the solar is supported by substantial competent evidence, will result in just and reasonable rates, and is in the public interest. And so this order would approve the solar settlement. And again, the actual order goes into much more detail. I know it doesn't seem like it, but I'm trying to give you an abbreviated version of the order. Turning to the non-unanimous gas settlement. For a non-unanimous settlement, we apply a 5-factor test. Those factors are first, whether each party had an opportunity to be heard for its reasons for opposing a settlement. Second, whether the settlement is supported by substantial competent evidence. Third, whether the settlement conforms to applicable law. Fourth, whether the settlement will result in just and reasonable rates. And fifth, whether the results of the settlement are in the public interest. First, whether each party has had an opportunity to be heard on their reasons for opposing the settlement. The gas settlement is opposed by USD 259, the Wichita Chamber of Commerce, CURB, KIC, and its affiliates, the New Energy Economics, and Climate and Energy Partner. All of those parties had ample opportunities to be heard on their reasons to oppose the settlement. They filed testimony opposing the settlement, appeared at the evidentiary hearing where they were able to present witnesses and cross-examine signatories to the settlement. Following the evidentiary hearing, they filed post-hearing briefs reiterating their reasons for opposing the settlement. For all those reasons, this order finds the parties opposing the settlement had sufficient opportunity to be heard. Then I'm going to discuss the issue of substantial competent evidence and applicable law together, since there is some overlap in those. The relevant statute, KSA 66-1239 C2, requires a utility that is seeking predetermination to describe how it's consistent with its most recent preferred plan and resource acquisition strategy that was submitted to the commission. 66-1239 C3 explains that the commission can consider if the utility issued a request for a proposal from a wide range of participants willing and able to meet its needs, and if the plan selected by the utility is reasonable, reliable, and efficient. So the first step in applying the statute is to identify what is Evergy's most recent preferred plan and resource acquisition strategy. And in an order on May 15th, 2025, the commission determined that Evergy's 2024 IRP is its most recent preferred plan. The commission finds that the gas settlement is consistent with Evergy's most recent preferred plan and resource acquisition strategy. The next factor to consider is whether Evergy issued a request for proposal from a wide range of participants willing and able to meet the needs identified in the preferred plan. This order finds the evidence demonstrates Evergy submitted requests for proposal to a wide range of participants willing and able to meet the needs identified under its 2024 IRP. Again, the statute authorizes the commission to consider whether the plan selected by Evergy is reasonable, reliable, and efficient. The proponents of the settlement believe it is reasonable in part because it is necessary to serve a significantly increasing load profile, that Evergy's coal units are aging, that it complements the renewable resources and is responsive to the Southwest Power Pool's resource adequacy initiatives. The opponents contend it is not reasonable because the forecasted increased demand is speculative, and NEE criticizes Evergy for not selecting alternative plans that it believes would be more reasonable and more efficient, such as relying on more battery storage. The commission believes the forecasted increased demand is well supported rather than speculative. And this order notes that battery storage is not a one-to-one replacement for proposed gas plants and would not possess the same reliability attributes as the CCGTs. As staff explains, CCGTs are capable of starting up quickly and ramping up and down as intermittent and weather-dependent resources ebb and flow with weather patterns. Staff explains the CCGTs will emit 61% less carbon dioxide than the average coal unit in Evergy's fleet and 53% less carbon dioxide than the average gas unit. And due to their projected low heat rate, should be able to need only 40% of the amount of fuel used to generate the same amount of electricity as the average natural gas plant currently in Evergy's fleet. Evergy explained that while their IRP process did not select the absolute lowest cost portfolio, it selected the portfolio that performed the best under all risk factors. The oldest of the Jeffrey coal units was commissioned in 1978 and will be over 50 years old when the Viola plant comes online. Staff notes that in October 2022, a fire at the Jeffries Unit 3 caused the unit to be out of service for over a year. And the loss of Unit 3 serves as a reminder that aging plants experience unanticipated mechanical failures. And the Jeffrey 3 outage serves as a prime example of why a diversified generation mix is reasonable and prudent, and while Evergy is wise to modernize its dispatchable generation fleet. The commission agrees it is prudent to commence planning for the modernization and diversification of the thermal fleet. Staff explains that the lowest cost plan, which relied on renewable and battery storage and delayed coal retirements, is inefficient. Solar investments are projected to receive a capacity credit as high as 70% in the summer and 20% in the winter, but drop to 17% in the summer and just 5% in the winter by the year 2042. Therefore, Evergy would need 6 times as much solar at nameplate capacity to reduce the capacity of a thermal generation unit in the summer, and 20 times as much solar to replace the capacity of a thermal generation unit in the winter. That evidence suggests the CCGTs are far more efficient than relying only on renewables and battery storage to meet capacity requirements. Several of the opponents to the settlement fault Evergy for underestimating the probable future costs of natural gas. And the settlement contains provisions regarding the development of future fuel supply and hedging plans, but those actual plans are undeveloped and unknown. The best available evidence indicates natural gas will remain an affordable fuel source in the coming years, but given the uncertainty surrounding future natural gas prices and the recent volatility in the natural gas market, the commission believes new robust purchasing and hedging practices are necessary to ensure prudence of these investments. Thus, the commission directs Evergy to update it as these practices are developed. The final factor listed in the statute is reliability. Staff believes the natural gas plants will be highly reliable additions to Evergy's generation fleet. Director of Utilities Justin Grady testified the CCGTs are expected to have low forced outage rates compared to other generation types except for nuclear and hydroelectric. The CCGTs are being built to withstand winter temperatures as low as -15 degrees Fahrenheit and demonstrating their reliability value during winter weather events. The overwhelming weight of the evidence suggests the CCGTs will be extremely reliable compared to other generation resource options. Thus, this order finds the CCGT settlement is reasonable, efficient, and reliable, and that it satisfies the statute 66-1239. After reviewing the evidence, this order finds Evergy's decision to add Kansas Sky, Viola, and McNew at the defined DCEs is prudent. But the commission will review the prudence of all costs incurred to construct and acquire these new plants once Evergy seeks to add them into rates. This order affirms the 11-581 docket's understanding of KSA 66-128G. So if project costs exceed the DCEs, there will be a full prudence review for any amount incurred above those DCEs, with Evergy bearing the burden to demonstrate those costs are appropriate to recover from ratepayers. And even if project costs come in below the DCEs, commission staff will still audit all construction costs for accuracy, necessity, and adherence to the contract terms, which may result in disallowance of some costs. The CCG settlement contains provisions requiring Evergy to make a compliance filing justifying the prudence of continuing forward if it reasonably believes actual project costs will exceed 115% of the DCE. This provision should significantly reduce the possibility that the costs of the CCGTs will exceed their DCEs by 200%. Turning to whether the settlement will result in just and reasonable rates. The settlement will not immediately impact rates. The CWIP rider, which is authorized by KSA 66-1239 C6A, allows Evergy to begin recovering no earlier than 365 days after construction begins on each plant, but aside from the CWIP rider, no other cost will be added to rates until a future rate case. Evergy estimated the rate impact of the CWIP surcharge will range from approximately 0.58% to 3.82%. But the CWIP surcharge should reduce the overall project cost charged to customers by minimizing the allowance for funds used during construction that will be included in rates. Evergy does estimate that each CCGT will ultimately result in an approximate all-in bill impact of 4.3% for Evergy Kansas Central customers. Together, the CWIP rider and the CCGT additions are expected to result in an approximately 8.6% in rates. Reliability comes with higher costs, and the new CCGTs will produce rate increases that will be unwelcome by many customers. This order notes that while the commission finds the CCGT settlement to be reasonable, reliable, and efficient as required under the statute, the commission still has concerns over the cost and rate impact. Since the rate moratorium ended, Evergy, and specifically Evergy Kansas Central, has filed rate cases on average every other year. The commission is troubled by the frequency and magnitude of rate cases and strongly encourages Evergy to focus on pacing investment to better align with load growth and mitigate large rate increases. Also, the commission's finding that the Viola and McNew plants are reasonable, efficient, and reliable should not be construed to assume the commission will automatically find the additional planned generation identified in the 2024 and 2025 IRP would be considered reasonable, efficient, or reliable. The commission finds the CCGT settlement will result in just and reasonable rates based on estimates that the combined CWIP rider and plant additions will lead to an 8.6% increase in rates. However, the commission will review the prudency of the costs once Evergy seeks to add them into rates, as well as the resulting proposed rates, as well as whether the resulting proposed rates are just and reasonable. And the final factor is whether the settlement is in the public interest. And this order explains it is in the public interest for Kansans to be served by a reliable and affordable electric grid. Without more generation, Evergy customers face reliability concerns resulting from an aging generation fleet, increasing load, and more extreme weather. The question facing the commission is not whether additional generation is needed in the future, but whether the settlements before it represent the best approach for adding generation. Currently, there is not an economically or commercially viable alternative technology that can provide long duration, firm dispatchable power when intermittent resources are not available. Because battery storage accreditation will decline over time with the new ELCC methodology, the commission finds the only way to truly evaluate this option is through a long-term economic modeling like what was performed in the IRP. And Evergy's IRP did not select a battery storage. It selected a 50% ownership stake in two CCGTs. Solar and battery storage are worth considering in resource plans, but they do not appear technologically and economically viable under current conditions to replace the attributes of a CCGT. The commission expects these conditions will be constantly reevaluated in future Evergy IRPs. The flexibility of CCGTs make them valuable assets, even if the future is dominated by more renewable energy resources. One of the major concerns that opponents of the gas settlement express is Evergy's failure to put forward detailed evidence of its proposed fuel supply plan or the ultimate impact projected fuel costs will have on customer rates. The commission does not believe the need to construct new pipeline capacity to deliver gas to the gas plants is an insurmountable obstacle. The commission expects that the gas utilities will be more than willing to construct pipelines to serve these new plants, and the commission anticipates that they will likely be recovered through long-term service contracts with the pipelines. The settlement provisions that require Evergy to collaborate with staff and CURB during the development, the settlement provisions require Evergy to collaborate with staff and CURB during the development of gas purchasing plans. But to strengthen that provision, the commission directs Evergy to file its initial detailed fuel supply plan and an analysis of the impact fuel costs will have on customer rates in a compliance docket within 120 days of the commission's final order in this docket. The commission finds firm natural gas transportation and supply arrangements to be absolutely paramount to the reliability of the CCGTs to serve Evergy Kansas Central customers. Prior to beginning construction, Evergy is required to submit assurances that it has obtained firm gas transportation and supply agreements. And the commission also wishes to be appraised of Evergy's gas purchasing strategies, including hedging practices. The commission gives great weight to Section 5K of the settlement, which provides if Evergy becomes aware of information that leads it to reasonably believe that actual project costs are projected to exceed 115% of the DCEs, that Evergy will make a compliance filing justifying the prudence of continuing construction. The commission believes this provision will provide significant safeguards against cost overruns. And furthermore, the commission will have the opportunity to review the prudence of any expenses before they're put into rates and billed to customers. Thus, this order finds approving the settlement is in the public interest. And so in short, this order approves both or too late to say in short, that's what my wife does. She says short story, then half an hour later we're still going on. But I hope she's not watching. Anyway, this order approves both the CCG settlement and the solar settlement. And just for listeners, there's a public and confidential version of the order, but the only difference is the attachments. There is a single redaction to the solar settlement that's attached to the confidential version, but otherwise the two versions of the order are identical. With that, I'm available for questions.
All right, Brian, take a breath and a drink. Okay, with that, we've had a comprehensive rundown of what's in the order, although I think all of us can attest that there is even more in the order for those of you that want to read it. But at this time, let me ask if there are any questions for Mr. Fedotin, beginning with Commissioner Keither.
I don't really have a question, but I have a concern, and I really don't think it's fair to ask Brian this question. I think it'd be more for Justin, but just to bring it up, watching the news the other night, there were two independent owners of in Lawrence addressing the concerns about solar going forward, concerning what's going on in Washington, D.C. And both of the owners of those businesses said they don't think anything's going to get built. So that makes me question our big sky settlement and where we go from there if that just doesn't come to be.
Yeah, and I don't know, Brian, if you want to speak to that, I do know there are provisions in that settlement that
Right.
say if there are changes in policy that would change the economics of the project, that they are to come back before us. I think a lot of the solar development, this is just me speaking, yeah, it probably hinges on what commence construction means. That's the new standard, that people are going to have to commence construction by a little under a year from today. So I suppose we'll be hearing about that for that project and potentially others. I don't know, Brian, if you had anything else to add on the issue.
No, I think you did a good job, and I would also just add that Evergy is required to notify the commission if they're substantially ahead of or not substantially ahead, if they believe that costs will exceed the definitive cost estimates, and it's not 100% of the definitive cost estimates, it's 115. So there's a little bit of probably cushion in case of tariffs, the repeal of credits and other changes to the economy.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I basically knew the answer, but it's a concern. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Commissioner Keen, any questions?
Thank you, Chair French. No questions, but I have a comment. This will be the Reader's Digest version of what Mr. Fedotin provided. And I'm going to focus really more on my take on what I think are the consequences of this order. To protect Kansas electric ratepayers in this predetermination docket, there are four principal areas of concern and inquiry regarding Evergy's proposed generation capital expenditures. First is an inquiry concerning the need or necessity for the proposed investments and expenditures, current and prospective. Second, an inquiry into the effect such investments would have on affordability to ratepayers. Third and fourth inquiries involve the effect on electric service reliability and its close cousin resilience when outages occur from any cause or for any reason. Pardon me. Under Kansas law, every electric public utility in Kansas is required to provide reasonable, efficient, and sufficient service and establish just and reasonable rates. Since this is a predetermination docket, by definition, Evergy is seeking commission consideration, guidance, and approval of proposed electric generation capital expenditures involving many prospective, consequential, and in some instances, sequential decisions, contingencies, and events yet to evolve and unfold. Given the prospective nature of the consequential events in this docket, we may trust in Evergy's execution of their stated and intended goals only through extensive, ongoing, and diligent regulatory verification and oversight. Accordingly, if adopted, the Commission order addresses the prospective complexities and realities and concerns in this docket and protects Kansas electric ratepayers by conditioning and qualifying each and every actionable approval under the order. Through numerous regulatory compliance audits and periodic reporting and filing procedures and requirements, the Commission utilizes various safeguards and assurances to enable thorough regulatory oversight and thereby assure the proper and complete execution of all Evergy commitments and undertakings. These Commission conditions, safeguards, guardrails, and assurances are detailed within the order and the settlement agreements. And Mr. Fedotin has alluded to many of those. Okay. The first, and I think most basic inquiry is, what is the need and why the necessity for more dispatchable generation? It is in the public interest for Kansas to be served by a reliable and affordable electric grid. A reliable grid includes a diverse portfolio of generation with certain attributes, including flexibility, availability, and dispatchability. Without adequate reliable dispatchable generation, Evergy customers face reliability concerns resulting from an aging coal generation fleet, increasing load, and potentially more extreme weather. Evergy's coal fleet has been a most reliable, cost-effective, and beneficial generating source of electricity for Kansans for several decades. Coal continues to serve as an important dispatchable component, and indeed the largest contributor to Evergy's diverse electric generating mix. However, it seems reasonable and prudent to plan for the eventual retirement of Evergy's coal fleet because the future of these units is highly uncertain. The oldest of the Jeffries units was commissioned in 1978, and as Mr. Fedotin alluded to, will be over 50 years old if the proposed Viola combined cycle gas generation plant comes online in 2029. It is impossible to know the exact timing of when coal units will retire. Load growth may require their lifespan to be extended, or environmental policy changes or technological advances may shorten their lives. The KCC staff has supported Evergy planning ahead to avoid being forced to respond to sudden, unplanned, and problematic coal retirements. In October 2022, a fire at the Jeffrey Unit number 3 caused the unit to be out of service for over a year. As a result, Jeffrey 3 was unavailable to meet winter peak requirements for 2 years and summer peak requirements for 1 year, forcing Evergy to buy, in effect, paper capacity to meet its summer capacity reserve requirements for 2023. The loss of Jeffrey 3 serves as a reminder that the aging plants sometimes experience serious and consequential unanticipated mechanical interruptions. The frustration with the flexibility and indefinite coal retirement dates is understandable, and early retirements may not be in the ratepayers' best interests. This is a circumstance that appears to be supported by Evergy's 2025 IRP. To me, it seems prudent to commence planning for the modernization and diversification of the thermal fleet. Furthermore, regional resource adequacy requirements are now placing a premium on actual unit performance and availability. A large portfolio of aging resources potentially exposes Kansas ratepayers to costly penalties or expensive short-term capacity purchases. During Winter Storm Uri, electric utilities throughout the SPP region were required to shed load to maintain the integrity of the grid. And Kansas, in the process, and Kansas utilities incurred $700 million in economic damages. These costs were passed through to customers. In August 2023, SPP reported an all-time high peak demand, which was 10% higher than the peak from 2021. To protect against future outages or load shedding, effective 2023, SPP has increased the reserve margins for its utilities from 12% to 15%, and SPP has pending a request at FERC to increase those margins to 16% beginning in the summer of 2026. Furthermore, SPP has a pending request at FERC to implement new capacity accreditation methodologies for both thermal and renewable resources, which, if approved, are expected to reduce the capacity credit that wind energy currently receives. These accreditation rules will also emphasize actual historical performance and availability of thermal resources, as opposed to prior accreditation at near nameplate values. In sum, electric utilities will need to meet higher reserve margins while their existing resources are subject to more stringent accreditation rules. As a result, utilities like Evergy will need to maintain a diverse, reliable, and efficient fleet of generators, predominantly including dispatchable generators, to consistently meet consumer demand. It is reasonable and prudent to plan for the eventual retirement of Evergy's coal fleet because the future of these units is highly uncertain. The indefinite reliance on coal to serve new load may in fact drive up load system costs. There has been dramatic price volatility in the coal market in some parts of the United States over the past few years. Continued reliance on coal without alternative dispatchable resources also poses a substantial risk of future environmental compliance costs. Specifically, to continue operating the Jeffrey Units 2 and 3 beyond the early to mid-2030s will require Evergy to install high-cost selective catalytic reduction equipment. The deferral of planning for the eventual retirement of coal plants does not present for me a reasonable or responsible alternative to the combined cycle gas plants provided for in that settlement. While approving that settlement does not require or precipitate the retirement of any particular coal unit, it is reasonable and prudent to plan for this eventuality by starting to invest in alternative dispatchable generation types that can replace the reliability attributes of existing coal-fired units. A next major line of inquiry, I believe, is if there is a need for additional dispatchable generation, why the choice of the combined cycle gas generators at this time? KCC staff witness Justin Grady testified that the decision to recommend building the combined cycle gas turbine plants, or the CCGTs, is because they, number one, will add high flexibility, dispatchability, and they will add highly flexible, dispatchable generation to the system, which offers critical reliability benefits and services for customers, including the ability to ramp up and down quickly when needed. Second, they would be built to withstand winter temperatures as low as -15 degrees Fahrenheit. And third, they would be expected to have very low forced outage rates compared to other generation types, except for nuclear or hydroelectric. The evidence suggests that these combined cycle gas turbines are far more efficient than relying only on renewables and storage to meet capacity requirements. Renewables may continue to play an essential role as energy resources in the future, and storage may assist wind and solar resources in meeting future capacity needs. However, the evidence is abundantly clear. These resources alone will not allow Evergy to efficiently meet its capacity requirements. The opponents of the combined cycle gas turbine settlement have suggested supplanting some or all of those investments with some combination of renewables, battery storage, combustion turbine alternatives, or delaying the retirement of Evergy's coal plants and thereby delaying the need for additional resources, generation resources in near-term planning. Sorry, I have already addressed my concerns about delaying the planning process for additional generation. The evidence in the record demonstrates that currently there is not an economically or commercially viable alternative technology that can provide long duration, firm, dispatchable power afforded by the combined cycle turbines when intermittent resources are not available. The overwhelming weight of the evidence suggests that the combined cycle turbines will be extremely reliable compared to other generation options. They will undoubtedly improve the reliability of Evergy's generation fleet and offer the best combination of flexibility, affordability, and efficiency. Another major line of inquiry that I believe we need to address, and that I believe is addressed by the order, involves what are the cost containment safeguards to protect ratepayers against cost overruns. If Evergy becomes aware of information that leads it to reasonably believe that actual project costs are projected to exceed 115% of the definitive cost estimates, it is required to make a compliance filing justifying the economics and prudency of continuing forward with the McNew and or the Viola projects, or requesting commission approval to abandon the projects. This provision will provide significant safeguards against cost overruns. Furthermore, if definitive cost estimate project costs, if project costs exceed the definitive cost estimates, there will be a full prudence review for any amounts incurred above the definitive cost estimates, with Evergy bearing the burden to demonstrate those costs are appropriate to be recovered from ratepayers. Further, even if project costs come in under the definitive cost estimates, the commission staff will audit all product construction costs for accuracy, necessity, and adherence to the contract terms, which may result in a disallowance of recovery cost. The combined cycle plant settlement will not immediately impact rates. The commission will have the opportunity to review the prudency of the costs and expenses of these plants when Evergy seeks to add them into rates, as well as to determine at that time whether the resulting proposed rates are reasonable and just. Another major line of inquiry is how are the risks associated with gas availability or the adequacy of gas supply to operate the proposed combined cycle gas generation plants, how are those risk factors mitigated? One of them, again, as Mr. Foden noted, one of the major concerns that opponents of the combined cycle gas plant settlement agreement expressed is Evergy's failure to put forward detailed evidence of its proposed fuel supply plan and the ultimate impact projected fuel costs will have on consumer rates. Some have taken issue with a lack of current firm gas delivery and supply agreements to operate these combined cycle gas plants. An important combined cycle gas plant settlement provision requires Evergy to collaborate with staff and CURB during the development of a gas purchasing plan and to file the results of the plan in a compliance filing. However, to help alleviate such concerns, the Commission directs Evergy to file its initial detailed fuel supply plan and an analysis of the impact fuel costs will have on consumer rates in a compliance docket within 120 days of a final order being issued in this docket. Revisions to the plan are expected as plants near in-service, so the Commission again directs Evergy to file these updates in the compliance docket. The Commission finds firm natural gas transportation and supply arrangements to be absolutely paramount to the reliability of these gas plants to serve Evergy customers. Prior to beginning construction, Evergy is required to submit assurances that it has obtained firm gas transportation and supply arrangements. Furthermore, the Commission must be apprised of Evergy's gas purchasing strategies, including its hedging practices. One procedural matter specifically addressed within the order should be noted, in my opinion, within this venue. This matter concerns Evergy's frequency of rate cases. While the Commission is tasked in this docket with deciding whether these combined cycle gas settlement will result in just and reasonable rates independently of other recent pending or anticipated future rate cases, the Commission is profoundly aware of the impact rates have and rate increases have on customers. While the Commission in this docket finds the combined cycle gas settlement to be reasonable, reliable, and efficient as required by KSA 66-1239, concerns remain over the costs and rate impacts. The Commission has acknowledged that Evergy has improved its regional rate competitiveness. However, much of that progress is attributable to the 5-year rate moratorium following the merger of KCP&L and Westar to form Evergy, and the cost savings attributable to that merger. Since the rate moratorium ended in 2023, Evergy, and specifically Evergy Kansas Central, has indicated that it is intending to file rate cases on an average of every other year. The Commission is concerned and troubled by the frequency and magnitude of rate cases and strongly encourages Evergy to focus on pacing its proposed investments to better align those investments with actual load growth and the mitigation of large rate increases. The Commission understands that from time to time, new investment in electric capacity is needed to support reliability and economic development in Kansas. However, affordability and genuine maximum capacity needs must be major priorities and proactively pursued as Evergy addresses a seemingly endless list of ostensibly justifiable projects and initiatives. In conclusion, under the terms of this order, the portion of the combined cycle of gas plants to be constructed and owned by Evergy Kansas Central will be dedicated to serve only Evergy Kansas Central customers. Accordingly, under well-established cost causation principles, those costs will be borne by Evergy Kansas Central customers. Evergy has not committed to firm retirement dates for its coal facilities. Evergy is not asking the Commission to approve retiring any coal generation plants in this docket. Therefore, there is no reason to seek predetermination for retirements that are not definitive. Thus, the Commission specifically finds that if Evergy Kansas Central decides to retire coal generation and utilize securitization to recover energy transition costs as a result of a retired coal plant, Evergy shall file a request for predetermination. Finally, the Commission encourages Evergy to broaden its IRP to evaluate a wide variety of diverse solutions that may delay or obviate the need for costly, longer-term investments. At a time when generation capacity investments are very costly and involve many trade-offs impactful to ratepayers, be assured this commission values resource diversity and ratepayer risk mitigation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Keen. Do I have a motion to approve the order?
You do. I'm sorry. So moved.
And I think I heard a second there as
Yeah, you
well.
did.
With a motion and a second, is there any further discussion of the motion? I'll make just a couple quick comments.
Sure.
I agree with pretty much everything I've heard my colleagues say here, and the order is very well well done, I believe, and so I'll mostly let it speak for itself. But I will just say, you know, perhaps it's an overstatement to say that I agonized over this case. But
Yeah.
I definitely had a lot of complex and competing impressions of the request that we got from Evergy here. This proceeding is unique, as Commissioner Keen mentioned, because typically regulators rule on the prudence of a decision after the fact. After management has made that decision, put it in place, and then asked to put it in rates. This is different. And as Mr. Fedotin pointed out, it doesn't happen very often where a utility will come to us and tell us, this is what we want to do. Do you agree? And so that made this a very unique case. The magnitude of the issues in this case were unique as compared to other cases. We get a lot of very big and impactful cases, but this one was particularly impactful from a customer affordability and customer reliability standpoint. And then finally, probably the element that caused me the most consternation or frustration is just the uncertainty of the future. And that I think that's difficult for the utility and clearly for all the parties in this case to deal with, is that you are looking at a range of many different possible futures. And it's difficult to know what the right choice is at any given point in time when the underlying facts seem to change so rapidly. It seems like today the underlying costs of any different generating capacity option shift day to day. So it's very difficult, but it kind of underlies the reason why you have to go through a very comprehensive analysis and process like we did in this case. And at the end of the day, I think it's very clear in my mind that this set of investments, the solar facility and the 250% stakes in the combined cycle plants, are the best option to serve customers at this time, given everything that we know now through this rigorous proceeding. The combined cycles will come at a very high capital cost compared to what combined cycles cost just a few years ago. That is a concern. But as we learned in the proceeding, we will get a lot of reliability value out of these plants and expect them to be big contributors to the system for many decades to come. Even as Mr. Fedotin and Commissioner Keen noted, even under a future scenario where the grid is primarily made up of non-fuel, renewable, intermittent resources, we would expect these to be the type of these combined cycle plants to be the type of resources that are going to operate with a lot of value and flexibility to back up those other resources for many decades. Also, the solar part of the settlement is interesting from my perspective. Those additions are probably well past due, but we do expect the solar to be very complementary to existing resources, particularly wind, that contributes at night, and we have a lot of it. We don't have a lot of solar to come on board and fill the daytime gaps. And also the fact that that solar will be a very important physical hedge against burning different fuel types when it is available. So that's an aspect that's very important. Finally, I just wanted to highlight, as Commissioner Keene did, the important improvements to the IRP process that will help Evergy make sure they consider an even wider range of options than maybe they did in prior IRPs. Specifically, the settlement points out the consideration of energy storage at existing generation sites. And I would urge Evergy not to just stop there, to think very flexible about other options they could include in their resource planning processes to try to mitigate risks for customers. But the future, as I mentioned, is very uncertain. Right now, if you look at Evergy's IRPs for additional capacity additions, there's quite a bit of solar in there. There's a little wind. There is a long list of additional natural gas plants. The solar may still make sense, but as Commissioner Keither noted, the economics may change based on policy decisions that go on in different cities other than Topeka. For the natural gas plants, as we saw in this proceeding, those facilities do offer a lot of reliability attributes that we absolutely need, and we will probably need more of as we transition away from some of our existing thermal resources. But they do come with very high capital costs, and they come with exposure to unregulated and potentially very volatile fuel markets. And so there are definite risks associated with putting all of our eggs in that basket. And I would concur with all the statements. And these statements also exist in the order that the Commission highly values diversity of resources to make sure that customers are not completely exposed to any one resource type. So I will just leave it here to say the next few years will be extremely important for our electric utilities to think strategically and work with regulators to position customers and the state advantageously for the coming years. We need to be ready to seize on economic development opportunities while also being thoughtful and mitigating risks to affordability and reliability. It's a very challenging time to make those decisions, resource decisions, but that's what Kansans should expect of their utilities. And I believe this set of settlements, adding some solar and adding two 50% stakes in combined cycle natural gas plants, is a good first step. So with that, those are my comments. Is there any further discussion on the motion that we have in front of us? Hearing none, all in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say no. The order is approved. With that, that's everything we have noticed on today's business meeting agenda. If there's nothing further to come before us this afternoon, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
I got a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, vote aye.
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 Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you all. Take care.
Take care.